Copenhagen Center Advancement School of Journalism. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Leadership Webinar Series at the Copenhagen Center. The mission of our center is to empower young women, professionals, and academics in all the fields of communication, develop those who can become and make a difference in their professions and in their communities. So, we are delighted that you have joined us today for this webinar. Our speaker will provide you with knowledge you can use as you pursue your dreams in the field of communication. It is my pleasure to invite Dr. Raul Reyes, the Dean of the School of Journalism and Mass Communication, for opening welcomes. Thank you.
Hello, welcome. Hello, Diane. I hope you can see us from there.
Yes, yes, hello.
It's kind of an odd situation where I'm looking at a camera, hoping that you see me, but I trust that you are. So I wanted to thank you and welcome you to the webinar series. I couldn't have said any better than Professor Segal and Segal when she opened the webinar series. Obviously, we are very happy that the students are here taking advantage of this opportunity, and we hope to put more events like this together as we progress in the year. So I wanted to thank you specifically, Segal and also Dr. Copenhagen, who can be here today with us physically in the room, for organizing these events and for actually taking the leadership in the center. And a special thank you to Dianne Festa, one of our alums who graduated from FIU and works now at NBC News. She'll tell you a little bit more about what she does at NBC News. But I want to thank Dianne especially for being available to talk to our students today and to do this webinar directly from New York. So thank you, Diane, and thank you all. Segal, or...
Thank you, Dean. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Maria Elena Villar, our host for today's webinar, who will introduce the speaker.
Hello, my name is Maria Elena Villar. I'm an associate professor and interim chair of the Department of Advertising and Public Relations, and I will be the host moderator for today. So if you're in the room or if you're joining us online and you have questions, please feel free to send them to us either through the chat in the webinar or through a note if you're here. And after our speaker says her remarks, we'll have some question and answer as time permits. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dianne Festa. She's a director of news partnership team for the last 15 years at NBC News in New York. And she is now the vice president. She's worked over the years to leverage the relationship with the owned and affiliate stations and to provide editorial content to stations and increase local participation on NBC News projects and major stories. Her stories have included the 9/11 terrorist attacks, Hurricane Katrina, and many important news stories. She spent the last 2 years growing NBC News and MSNBC internationally, working closely with NBC Universal International team, as well as NBC News Channel. She's been with NBC News for 30 years. Prior to joining the news partnership team, she coordinated the network's election year coverage as political editor. In 1991, Festa was named the Moscow bureau chief, immediately following the fall of the Soviet Union, and covered Russia's transition to a market economy until 1995. During her tenure there, she directed coverage of 4 presidential summits and the war in Chechnya. She was among those nominated for a 1993 Emmy Award for coverage of the October 1993 revolt in Moscow. From 1989 to 91, Festa was the weekend news manager. Her responsibilities included coordinating worldwide news coverage for NBC News. During the Persian Gulf War, she served as the acting bureau chief in Amman, Jordan. Previously, she worked as an assignment editor in the London Bureau from 1986 to 1989. Dianne began her career in 1983 working with NBC affiliates in the Florida region, as an NBC Miami Bureau Coordinator, and also participated in coverage of the Grenada invasion and the civil wars in El Salvador and Nicaragua. Festa graduated from Florida International University in 1983, proud alumna of our school with a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism, and she lives in New York with her son Lucas. So it is my pleasure to welcome Dianne Festa as our webinar speaker for today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I thank you, Maria Elena, and thank you, Dean Rice, for the lovely comments. It is with great pleasure I join you today as an FIU alum. Very proud to say I am that. I'm sorry that Dean Copenhaver, who I worked with over the years, 30 some odd years ago, she was a pioneer as a female leader in journalism in the 1980s and continued throughout the year, so I wish her a speedy recovery. So I thought today I would take you through my personal journey I'm so proud to be at NBC News for 31 years now, and I would tell you a little bit about where I went, some of the choices I made in my career, give you at the end of that some tips, if that's helpful, as you start your own careers, and then open it up for questions. So again, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. I had attended University of Florida for a few years, which was a good journalism program, but for personal reasons, in the 1980s, I came back to Miami and had read all about and heard about this great buzz of FIU opening up a journalism program, communications program, and thought, wow, this is a great opportunity to join an exciting institution, and you should all be very proud of what it has become, and I feel fortunate I was there at the early days. So FIU had an a relationship with NBC News at the time with the NBC Miami Bureau. The NBC Miami Bureau was responsible for the network's coverage of all of South Florida, all the news coming out of South Florida, and also Central America. I have to say that Miami, and you may be discovering that and hearing it from other people, but I think Miami is the greatest news town to be. I think you've got the international story, I think you've got the domestic story, and I can tell you that clearly every national story has a thread somehow connecting Miami to that report. So if I was giving advice, number one, go to Miami, get an internship, and learn the news business there, because your fingers are in all those different areas. During my internship in Miami, I had the good fortune of working with somebody you may all know. He was most recently the president of Telemundo, Don Brown. Don, I know, has worked with FIU over the last couple of years to put in a program somewhat like our NBC News Associate program, where you get real hands-on experience in the business. And I'm going to talk about the News Associate program at the end of my guidelines. But Don was my mentor in this business, and I was so fortunate at an early age to have somebody who would allow me to tap into the expertise of all the incredible veteran crews and veteran correspondents that we had in our bureau. So I remember one of the things I talk about a lot when people say, you know, how with no experience could you contribute to the organization? And I just thought, well, sheer hours. I was the first to arrive every morning and leave after the entire bureau closed up. I was also there, and again, I'm very much dating myself, but in those days, we got our wires on the, we got our stories off the wires. So I would come in the morning and have all those, call it rip and read, have those wires waiting for our team when they came in. And again, dating myself, we had a telex to communicate with our teams in Central America. So I'd be on the telex, talking to our crew in Tegucigalpa, and so those were the very, very early days. During those days, I also thought there was a chance I wanted to do on-air reporting, and I have to tell you that like many bureau chiefs and leaders, they are consumed with tapes coming from wannabe reporters, and so Don was no exception. He had piles and piles of tapes of people wanting to look at his tape and review it. So in any case, he said to me, "You want to be a reporter? Go out. I'm sending you out on a story that the Today Show is doing on whether the spring break location of Fort Lauderdale was it going to lose ground to Daytona Beach." And not a deep story, but we went out, and it was a fun story, and I went with our veteran crews and got to interview a lot of folks and businesses there. And at the end, I did a stand-up, and I wrote the story as if I was going to do it. Came back, and Don looked at the tape, and he's like, "Okay, being very gracious. All right, so you have your work cut out for you." But I have to tell you, it was there that I realized very early, and I was grateful for that, not to spin my wheels for many years, that, you know what, I had the most fun gathering the story, doing the interviews, sitting in on the edit room, and watching the finished product. I didn't need to, I didn't need to pursue that. There were people I learned later in my career that you got to have that hunger in your belly, that you want to be on air. You want to, that you live and breathe for it. So I was fortunate to learn that at a young age. So I went on, and I stayed in Miami for 3 years, again under the great guidance of all of the correspondents we had there. I got to assist them on stories. We covered everything from Nicaragua and Salvador civil wars. I was able to be sent there and assist our teams. One of my big breaks was during the Grenada invasion, the U.S. Military invading Grenada. Again, your parents may remember this, but the military would not allow the journalists to actually be there for the invasion. We had to be in Barbados, and that was our staging ground. But that was great. That was great for me to have early on, and then I was sent back on my own about a year later for the anniversary coverage. So those were wonderful, wonderful opportunities. Again, Miami had the hurricanes, had the drug stories, had so many. The Challenger explosion happened towards the end of my time there. It just had everything. So my minor at FIU was international relations, and I had a real passion for the foreign story. And in those days, the company, when they saw somebody that they wanted to grow for the future, would allow them to get their feet wet on overseas assignments and send you there and sponsor you there and provide housing and again invest in your future. Those were the days, and then in 1986 there were bureaus, so many more bureaus around the world. London was the hub, if you will, for all the news gathering. So I was sent over to be on the overnight assignment desk, and I was there for nearly 3 years. Great stories came through there. I was able to run coverage for all of the, for the tragedies on the Lockerbie bombing, to the stories that the U.S. cannot get enough of, which is the royals when Diana and Charles separated, to the Iran-Contra story. I mean, there were so many wonderful stories there, and my role was to dispatch our crews and our correspondents, and I was also given the opportunity to go out and produce stories there in London. So the next step was my boss, my mentor, was given the opportunity to get a senior leadership position in New York for NBC News. And I was loving my time in London. I was flourishing, I thought, in terms of getting the producing experience and just learning a lot, but also having a good time in life. And Don called me up and said, I'm starting my new management team here, and I'd like you to be part of it. So this is another tip for you guys. Never say no to your mentor in this business, despite the fact it may not be the perfect time for you to move, but I jumped at it. And I was given the role of weekend news manager here, which again was working with our weekend show producers on coverage of stories on the weekend. And those years, 1989 to 91, wow, there was so much news. I mean, starting with the Berlin Wall falling, and on the weekends, we had a situation which does not exist now, but in 1989, the cell phones that we have, everyone is so reachable instantaneously today. That was not so much the case then. It was not the case then. Our president of NBC News lived in Iowa, and he traveled home every weekend. Don went home to Miami. So it's sort of baptism by fire of being here, having to make those calls without being able to call, to be in contact with everybody. So big stories like Mandela's release from prison happened, and the Romanian Ceausescu and his wife were executed. I mean, there were so many stories. The U.S. hostages out of Lebanon came. All that seemed to happen on the weekend, and it was the best training ground for me because I had to think right there and work with our head of sports, because we were in sports programming, to interrupt the network on carving out time. And again, I learned a tremendous amount during those years. And then I raised my hand there was a need to bring some reinforcement to the Middle East during the Persian Gulf War. So I wanted to be part of that coverage. I did not go to Iraq, but Amman, Jordan was our staging area, so I ran the bureau there for a couple of months. But my big assignment was to try to get an exclusive interview with King Hussein at the time, and King Hussein had not been giving television interviews, so I was charged with that. And again, another tip along the way is just immerse yourself with connecting with these offices in terms of securing context, and it served me well when I moved to Moscow with a whole new group working at the Kremlin. But when I landed in Amman, I went directly to the Royal Hashemite press office, and worked that for nearly 7 weeks. And was able to secure that interview. And those were the days the Today Show would give it the first half hour of the show with no commercials, and that was very exciting. So I did that stint, and then again, foreign was still in my blood. I heard about an opportunity coming available in Moscow for the bureau chief, and I have to tell you, this was after the fall of communism, and this was every journalist's dream, to be able to be there and to be part of that exciting transition from communism to democracy. And so it was it was a rigorous process, though. It was open up to the entire company, the posting, and what worked, I think, for me was my overseas experience, but also the fact that those days they were starting to look at putting people overseas who didn't have large families. So I was single, I was hungry, I had just done Jordan, so that certainly helped me. And I had the support I had the great honor to represent NBC News in Moscow at such a critical time. The first female bureau chief there for NBC News. So again, I took this with great honor, and I had the support of senior leadership, I certainly felt the pressure of the broadcast producers and talent to deliver and deliver soon. So I mean, just as an aside there, I'll tell you that some of the comments to me were, well, wait a second, you know, you're going to a place, you know, I had a fascination with Russian literature and history, but you're going to a place that, you know, you're not a Sovietologist, and you haven't studied, you know, you haven't gotten your feet wet ever over there. And I would say, I'm not a Sovietologist, but there is no more Soviet Union. There is no more Soviet Union, so there's an incredible opportunity for us to establish new contacts in the Kremlin. And what I lack in experience, I hope I make up for in moxie and true grit. So I took that assignment, and it's still one of the highlights of my entire career. During my time there, we had our broadcasts come over there, and you know, Tom Brokaw was head of Nightly News at the time, and we did week-long series from there. It was a wonderful time for me to witness history in the making. There was also a time as a journalist that you were able to find stories that you could never report on before. You know, our correspondents were able to go out. We would all talk about what stories might be of interest for Nightly or for the Today Show, but our correspondents went out and did the stories we kind of put into a gee whiz bucket. Things like in the Soviet Union, because there was very limited birth control, the average Russian woman would think nothing of having an abortion. So there would be, you know, the average Russian woman would have 5 abortions, and we went to Siberia, or I should say Jim Maseda went to Siberia with his crew, and were able to document the lifestyle of and the mindset of a woman who has to make these decisions, hard decisions, but for them, the economic chaos just would not allow for them to bring a child in. And again, it wasn't part of their culture. So he documented that story. We also there was a fascination in the US at the time with the organized crime story. This was the Wild Wild East for a short period as more and more people took advantage of the economic situation. And then I would say one of the highlights there was during the time that President Yeltsin, there was a political standoff between President Yeltsin and the parliament. And this was the bloodiest time since 1917 Russian Revolution, where there were tanks on the streets, and very tense situation with our crews, and that's another story in and of itself. But my 4 years there were incredible, and I came back. You know, it's interesting that when you're the bureau chief overseas, it's a great honor, it's a great experience, but you also want to make sure that you don't stay overseas too long, because you don't want to be forgotten in New York or in the US, and you want to make sure that you're still in touch with what's going on here. So I came back as a political editor on a campaign that was probably one of the quietest campaigns, the Clinton-Dole campaign. So I did that for about 8 months, and then I was tapped to work with my colleague at the time on in the affiliate world, which you heard Maria reference. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. The affiliates, even in my days in Miami, my job was to call the Florida stations, to see what was going on in, you know, in terms of stories. They were the first line of defense on breaking news. We would call them. We would call them for good ideas that were given to Nightly News and Today Show. I can't stress how important the affiliates are to the network. And so that was in my early days a foundation. And over the years, I've worked very closely with the stations on big projects, editorial projects. One of the big ones we brought to Florida, also to Miami, was Education Nation. And that was a big success of the collaboration on editorial projects between the network and our stations. And I went off and did a stint on, after working with Lloyd Siegel, my predecessor, I went off and did a stint on growing NBC News overseas. And so a year ago, I took over the department that Lloyd has retired, and I am now in charge of news partnerships. And we are collaborating with the affiliates more than ever. We collaborate with them on investigative stories. We collaborate with them on breaking news every day. We collaborate with them on Today Show big theme weeks. There is just incredible opportunity in our industry right now with all that's going on. We are only as good as our stations, because I call them our human intelligence network, if you will, because they're going to hear about the stories first. So we have to tap into that, and I have an amazing team here to help support that. And we're a year into it, and it's great. So sorry, I hope I didn't take too long on that, but that's a nutshell of my journey. And we can either open it up to questions, or I have put together, I don't have a PowerPoint today. I thought I have an old-fashioned list of tips for all of you starting out that I think that over the years, some of which I was told about and some of which has changed so much since I started, and I'm happy to go through that. So Maria, is that okay? Shall I go
that would be
route?
fantastic.
Okay, great. So I have to put my glasses on for this one. All right. Well, first of all, this is this sounds so easy and so obvious, but I have to say it because you've got to make sure when you go into this career, there's nothing in the world you'd rather do, because it is such a competitive business. It is such a it's a business where you're really going to have to compromise on your personal life, and I did for so many years, and I have absolutely no regrets. But particularly when you start out and for the first decade or so, that's going to have to take a back seat. So know you want to do it. Don't just be curious about it. Have the passion for it. The area of knowing every facet of the business has never been more important than now. Know how to write. Know how to write and get the writing experience now. You can get it from, again, some of this you already know and you're already doing. You can get it on campus, you can get it in the community, but you've got to get those muscles flexed, because at the end of the day, whatever you end up deciding to do in our profession, broadcast, print, digital, you've got to have the writing skills, and they'll serve you throughout your career. Know how to shoot. And once again, at the expense of dating myself, but I am here to say I did not come in when we were shooting news stories on film, okay? But I came in at the very end of that, and we were then moving into Betacam, and now everybody's shooting on their iPhone. So you have the opportunity right now to start chronicling your own story. So you never know when you'll be the only one at the site of the story with your iPhone camera. You should start blogging. You should start doing your own reports. I mean, the days of sending in a resume, just a print resume, I know has evolved to many people are sending in clip reels. And even if you're not an aspiring reporter, even producers are doing that. So start learning, make sure you're shooting, and also learn how to edit. Learn the latest platforms on whether it's Avid or Final Cut Pro. Just make sure you absorb yourself on every single level of that. And then know how to market your stories on social media. And I don't care how pure a reporter you are going to have to know all about social media and how to market the stories. Another area that I referenced before is, and you probably saw in my trajectory in my career, is you got to take risks. You have got to take risks. You're young. You have to take chances and try new things. And I didn't have, in my career path, I did not have a set path. There were opportunities that came up. I knew that I wanted to grow in every single angle I could. And I just was able to say, I'm going to leave Miami, I'm going to leave my family, I'm going to go to London. This is an incredible opportunity. I think today's environment has changed somewhat in that there's fewer foreign bureaus, and that I was lucky to be one that when they moved me to Moscow as the bureau chief, many of the networks are now hiring local hires and making those hires within those countries. So I'm not sure that opportunity is as plentiful as it was when I was there, but there are other opportunities, things I never had that you have a chance to do. So pick up, move, and just put that personal life on the side for the moment. And don't forget that we're all storytellers at the end of the day. And as I said earlier, learn about the technology, but also you can, we're talking about this, the industry is in a current state of transformation. We're all learning how to be relevant to our news audience, whether it's on air, but now online. But at the end of the day, you can learn all the technology you want, but at the end of the day, it's all about content, and it's all about the story you have. And the story you tell, it went away. I'm sorry, I thought it went away. And the story you tell has to be interesting, has to be accurate, above and beyond. But again, don't get so wrapped up in the technology, because you will learn it, but you have to find compelling, interesting stories. The one area I'm going to talk about a little bit, which I think has served me well, and I think I'm even on the borderline of extreme on this, but I can't speak any differently about it because it's worked well for me, and that is tenacity. Tenacity in terms of finding a story, getting that interview, thinking of plan A, thinking of plan B when A falls down, just never giving up. One of my early lessons was, I remember in the Miami Bureau, I was tasked with getting somebody to agree to an interview to be on the Today Show. And I made calls, I would say I made about 4 or 5 calls and was getting rejection. And I went back to my boss and I said, they're not going to talk. And my boss said to me, how many people did you call? And I said, 5. And he said, 5? Are you serious? Go do 20 more, then I'll have you do another 20. So it became the theme throughout my career. I never would take no for an answer. And mostly it has served me very, very well. Another little lesson in Miami was when I was in Barbados the military allowed us to go into Grenada at the time, so I was with our producer, and we were up for days without any sleep. And I had called back to Miami, and there was an interview that CBS got that we did not get. And my boss at the time said, why didn't we have that interview? And I just, oh my God, we have not slept in days. We have not eaten. And I will never forget this, but my boss said to me, okay, so you are sitting in one of the biggest stories of our times. And I have to tell you that you can, if you're thinking of sleeping and eating, you're in the wrong business. Go get a job at the bank. Go get a job 9 to 5. Just suck it up. And to me, I have to tell you, those words resonate. And anytime we have interns here, I tell that story. So it's all about tenacity, though. One other area I alluded to before with the team I have here. and I can't say enough in our business, and that is, we are in this business, and it's not about us. It is about the team. It's about collaborating with your team. It's about working on a story with your crew, your editor. It's about the storytelling process with your team. And if you can't learn to work in a team environment, you're not going to make it in this business, because, again, we've seen too many people where it becomes very much about them and not enough about the finished product and the collaboration that went on. So I have to tell you right now, just start thinking that this is not a single product that you're going to be responsible, or it's going to be with the help and support of everybody else around. You probably heard this before too, about networking and reaching out and in the business and contacting people. You are probably going to be exposed to people in our industry right now in your while you're at school, or whether you go to job fairs, or through any capacity, and you want to follow up with those people. You want to network. You don't want to harass the person, but if you end up meeting somebody that you want to hear and pick their brain about what you should pursue in terms of your career, follow up in an email. Follow up and say, can I get 10 minutes with you? And don't be shy about doing that, because that'll serve you well. The other thing I would say in terms of reaching a position of leadership is you really have to know our business. You have to understand the mission of the business. So whether you're going to apply to an organization, a newspaper, a magazine, a website, a network, a local station, you need to know everything about that organization you are going to do an interview with or work at. And I think that a lot of people come in and, I've had interns come here and talk about, wanting the internship. And when I start asking them questions about, well, who's our anchor in the morning and our evening, and it's not, they are not watching perhaps the morning or the evening show newscast, but it doesn't matter. I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem is that they walked into NBC News and they didn't do their research. So wherever you go, let's say you go to the local station in Orlando, you need to know who are their competitors, who's winning the morning, who's winning the evening news race in terms of the ratings, what their brand is. Are they winning the Murrow Awards for investigative journalism? You've got to be knowledgeable when you sit down and you meet with these people. And that is a big, that happens quite too often when I have the interns come in here. They just don't know enough, or haven't taken the time to learn enough about our organization. So make sure you do that. Find a mentor. I mean, you have got it. I talk about my major mentor, but I've had various along the roads of my career in 30 years. And if you can find a mentor to tap into through every transition you make, it is, I can't stress it enough. It is huge. And some people talk about mentorship versus sponsorship. Sponsorship is fantastic. That means somebody's going to not just give you advice, but it sort of guide you and enlist their support of you all along the way. So, I mean, if that's something you can attain, that's wonderful. But try to find a mentor when you start your career. Let's see. I think on the social front, I think your professors are telling you about this now, but everyone's a reporter these days, and every company needs video. So be receptive to working for startup news apps, which may not be startups next year, but I mean, be receptive to all the new technologies surrounding actual reporting these days. Don't be so hyper-focused on one path, so keep your eyes open. Start to develop your own online persona. I'm sure you're all on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, but keep a blog if you like on Tumblr or one of the other blog platforms. But again, make sure that your pictures and your status remarks, I know you're hearing this from everybody, are just for you and your friends. And you're going to want to keep a separate profile for how you want to be known professionally. And a friend of mine said you should be telling everybody. A friend of mine who's in social said to me, you want to tell everybody to start learning how to code, learn how the websites are and the apps are created, learn HTML. So this is quite large right now. I think that's it. We'll touch upon it in questions that you have. I want to save some time for questions. One thing I do want to mention is, and show you a short video, is something that for graduating seniors, and whether you're undergrad or graduate, there is a wonderful program here at NBC News called the News Associates Program. And the application for the program is in March, or it's actually, I think they closed the application process at the mid-March. But it's a wonderful program offered at NBC News where you have 1 year long staff position here at the network where you'll be assigned to different programs, and either programs or on the news desk or in the field, in the studio. And it's terrific. It's similar to, I believe, what Don Brown started with Telemundo, where you actually do hands-on experience in the newsroom. And your very own, one of your former FIU alums, Silvana Ordonez, was a news associate, and she's currently at CNBC now as a news desk producer. So she should be the evangelist for this program, and I want to tell you about it and show you a quick video. So do you guys have that there, or do you need us to roll it from?
We're going to share the screen now and show the video.
Okay, terrific.
Exciting. We're going to service 3 or 4 national broadcast channel. Time we woke up this morning for the Today Show at 7 a.m. We have a clear run through tomorrow evening when MSNBC goes off the air, so it's going to go all night.
Romney should have arrived already. You're watching. Controlling the rating and just extended election day coverage. Usually this is my show, the 11 o'clock hour, but Morning Jones goes from 9 to noon right now because it is election day. So we are covering all exciting events, and I live right for you.
We have a special after 7 p.m. Eastern tonight after nightly, where we're cutting pieces of video that will be used in broadcast. A lot of voices coming at us, but it's only the beginning.
So there was a machine that went down, people would be here for hours. Part of the job at the desk is that we're actually taking a lot of viewer calls about potential irregularities in voting.
For instance, polling places in Staten Island, specifically the ones that were relocation spots for Hurricane Sandy victims.
That's what I like about the desk is that we get source first, we get check first.
I'm working in the bureau now, and I've been able to go out and field produce, and so glad I'm here.
I've many times dreamed about covering an election for a network.
come together.
I'm surrounded by a bunch of people who care equally about the future of our country. Clearly, they're standing out here in the cold.
The news is all around us. There are literally stories everywhere you turn, and it's an honor to be able to tell them.
The news is exhilarating. You never know what's going to happen.
What you're going to be researching, covering, field producing. Every day you don't know which story is going to lead, and it's our job to stay on top of it.
News is the foremost in history, in which you actively engage in the issues that are involved in our time and be part of something bigger than yourself.
The news is addictive. I can't wait to get up every morning and see what's going on in the world.
News is information. It is critical to our daily lives.
It is consciousness of the world and the people around you.
The news is storytelling. Because everything's a story, and there's always someone listening. It's us. It's our communities. It's our state. It's our nation. It's our world. There's no better way to understand yourself and to understand what's happening around you than to look at the news. The news is us. Yourself and understand what's happening and to look at the news. Us.
Hello.
Okay, so that was, those were some of our alum, here we are, some of our alum, hi there, alum news associates. Jessica Cardali runs the program here with Elena Nachmanoff. And she also said that she gave a couple of tips too that I should share with you when people come to her for prospective jobs or even on the news associate interview. She said there's a very large part of it that is a writing essay. And she said that in the cover letter, that in every cover letter you send out on your resume, just make sure you get your own voice. This is an opportunity for you to show off your writing on the cover letter and make sure that it has your voice, so that when it's a missed opportunity, if you're sending out a resume and it doesn't have the cover letter have strong writing or emblematic of what your voice is. And the second thing is
Yes, and we'll go ahead and share that link with all our students.
You could be,
but in the meantime, we have lots of questions from our participants online. So I want to use the last few minutes. I know that you're tight on time.
I can send all the
so I will
details
start
down
with a
link.
question by
I
your
think you have on
Teresa
if people want to
Ponte.
apply for the news associate program.
I'm going to read her question. She says, we both remember the network news business from when you started. Would you give us a chronology of the news business changes, technology, the role of the journalist, and most important, budget? So you've addressed some of these, telling us your story, but perhaps how would you describe how the role of being a journalist has changed over time? And you've addressed the need to know technology, and you've addressed that you really need to know the business side of it, which is sometimes not immediately something that journalists think about. You need to know the technology, how to do the different aspects of production. But in terms of the role of the journalist, how would you say that has evolved over time? That you really need to know the business side of it, which is sometimes something that journalists think about. That you need to know the technology, how to do the different aspects of production. But in terms of the role of the journalist, how would you say that has evolved over time?
Well, first of all, hi to Teresa Ponte. I remember her well, and you're in great hands with her there. I have to go back to the role of the journalist. At the end of the day, the role of the journalist has not changed. It is, again, all about storytelling. It's about the truth. It's about making sure you have an interesting story. It's the journalism part of it isn't going to change. You have to have the standards that you always had. So the core of that has not changed. The business has changed, as we've talked about. The business has changed in that on so many levels. I remember for me that, you know, the first half of my career was spent in the field and gathering the news and being part of it. And the second half of my career has been on the, you know, in the executive and the media management end of it. And so I think for me, to be able to have had the experience as being out in the field, I would not be able to do my job today had I not had that experience. So, I mean, it continues to evolve. The transformation, we're in a constant state of transformation. I mentioned this before, that, you know, whether you go to film to digital camera now, it's again, the business may be changing, the technologies may be changing, but you cannot underestimate how, at the end of the day, we are going to be judged on the stories we tell and the product we put on the air. Yes, budgets, as Teresa quite rightly pointed out, is a challenge. That's why there's many fewer bureaus around the world, and even domestically. We rely on partnerships. Partnerships has changed it as well. Partnerships with ITN in London. We can't be everywhere, so we rely on correspondence from our partner networks to be there first until we can send our camera and our reporter on the scene. So that's changed. And in terms of the vetting process, this is a problem a little bit for all of us, is that everyone's a citizen journalist, right?
Well, related to that is a
everyone's got
question
an
by
iPhone,
Javier,
everyone's
who
wants
says,
to-
you know, what is the
wants
difference
to,
between being
get
a
on the
journalist
air.
and being an executive?
You still need to have the vetting process and the standards at the network or at the local station or wherever you are, to make sure you're going through the process of getting the story right.
Related to that is a question by Javier, who says, you know, what is the difference between being a journalist and being an executive?
Well, I think, again, maybe I reach back to my experience in the field, and it's always, I can't make a decision in a vacuum. I have to always think of it in terms of what would I do here if I was in the field? What did my experience in perhaps a similar situation, how did that inform my decision-making process? You know, again, when I tell you I work right now with our stations, we're trying to find the best stories and how to collaborate with them. So I'm still wearing my journalistic hat, you know, when it comes to making sure that we're
So
getting
many
the
of your
best out
remarks
our stations,
echoed
and they're,
what
you know, working
recurring
with us.
themes that
I've
we
gotta
had in
think in
this
terms of our
seminar
stories
series
and our,
at the Copenhagen Center. One
the
of them is the
tremendous
importance of
breadth of
finding
what we
mentors
do
and
with
people that
foreign
can
partners and
show you
affiliates
the way.
is probably
That
something
balance
that's changed
between
quite a bit. Over the
skills and
last, 2
technology and
decades.
critical thinking, and you've addressed that. But another thing that you talked a lot about was the importance of tenacity or moxie or grit, and how that is really what makes the difference, spending the hours to do it. Is that something you think that can be learned? Is that something that we as educators can help develop, or do you think that's just something that you're born with? Grit.
Yeah.
And how that is really what makes the difference, spending the hours to do it. Is that something you think that can be learned? Is that something that we as educators can help develop, or do you think that's just something that you're born with?
Excellent question. I think the kernel may be there. You're born with it. But I think that if you find somebody who inspires you and is passionate, and you have passion, because it's about passion at the end of the day. Are you passionate on this to be a journalist, to get that story, to be the first, but only be the first if you're accurate.
So
I
question
think it
from
could
Tara.
be, part of
And
your
it's
DNA.
also
On the other hand, there
refers
might
to one of
be,
the themes that we often discuss here, which is
there are people that could bring it out
how
of you as well.
the roles and
But if you're
opportunities for
not
women have
hungry,
changed in the
you
workplace.
are going to be
And one of the
limited in
things
how
you said
far
at
you
the
get in this
beginning of your
career.
presentation was how one of the assignments that you got was because they were moving, people with small families. So the question from Tara is, do you think that women with families have a more limited opportunities? And do you think, and my question is, has this evolved throughout your experience in the workplace? One of the assignments that you got was because they were moving, people with small families. So the question from Tara is, do you think that women with families have more limited opportunities? And my question is, has this evolved throughout your experience in the workplace?
I have a really good story to tell. I mean, yes, I was single at the time. I had no family. I think that was because they were cutting budgets overseas for some of our bureaus. And yes, so that was a financial decision. But I can tell you that right now I am sitting at a network where the president of the network is a female, where the chairwoman of NBC News Group is a female, where I believe it's 8 out of 10 of her senior leadership team is female.
Have you seen that evolve over time?
Never been a better time.
Is it different now than when you started?
Out of that group, almost everyone has a family. So no, I have a good story to tell on that front, and I think NBC News does as well. Yes.
Okay. Have you seen that evolve over time? Is it different now than when you started?
Oh yes, yes. I mean, I used to be in many of these meetings when I came back to be in the management end of things. I was in the minority in terms of females in those groups and in those editorial meetings, absolutely. But I can tell you that
I would like to optimistically think that we're evolving as a society, but we'll see.
and it's wonderful. It's wonderful, and I think we are right now. I would say of the networks, probably far ahead in terms of the female representation in our senior leadership roles. So very proud to be.
So we had several questions about, stories that were particularly impactful to you. And you, of course, you told us, the main stories that you covered throughout your trajectory. But are there any stories that were particularly impactful? Any scandals that were particularly interesting? Which one would you say is your most memorable story? Main stories that you covered throughout your trajectory. Are there any stories that were particularly impactful? Any scandals that were particularly interesting? Which one would you say is your most memorable story?
I probably think the Moscow uprising, if you will, was the most impactful. We were on the air around the clock. Our bureau was located in sort of a media center with Reuters and the BBC, et cetera. So we were all it was a real, they were our family in a way, but we were all covering this incredible story. I had I had to send out crews and correspondents in harm's way, and that weighed heavily on me. We stayed, those of us who lived near the Parliament building, I lived right next door, had to stay at the bureau, also at a hotel there, which was fortunate, until this was resolved for 10 days. And when I went home, I was right next door to the White House, which was fired on. I found in my bed 2 bullets that had gone through my glass windows from sniper fire. So thank God I was at the Radisson headquarters during that time. But these are, I was so worried. That to me.
So Samantha asks about covering an emotional story. How do you, when you're covering a topic that's particularly emotional, or you have a particular opinion, how do you remain impartial?
Your team is safe, and so yeah, that would be the one. that had the largest impact on me.
About covering an emotional story. When you're covering a topic that's particularly emotional or you have a particular opinion, how do you remain impartial?
I think, again, I'm not on the air, so it's easy, but as a producer, when I would do that, you have to be, it's a challenge sometimes, but you have to remain professional and objective. And, you have seen certainly in the reporters' accounts over the years, and particularly with cable news, you've seen a lot more first person sort of tell us, give us the color of what it's like there. And I think people want to
finally,
see
a
that
couple
little
of
bit
people
more
on
these
our
days than they did when
that
I
joined
was
us online
first
asked
starting out.
about
It was very
the
sort of
importance
dry,
of a journalist's
here's the news
credibility,
now.
particularly
People
in
wanna
light
know,
of the Brian Williams situation going
when did you
on.
feel
What
like,
do you
when did
have
you- and
advice
so I think
for
that
future
line has
journalists
to be,
about
you know,
safeguarding
you just
credibility
gotta
and
make
when
sure
there
you
are
don't cross
threats
the
to
line
a
too
journalist's
much.
credibility? Situation going on. What do you have advice for future journalists about safeguarding credibility and when there are threats to journalist credibility?
Well, first of all, I'd be disappointed if I left this webinar without someone raising it. So you're a good journalist. So hats off to you there. And I hope you get a job at the White House.
And we train our
asking
students on
tough
that as
questions.
well.
As you can appreciate, I'm in no position
So,
to talk about the events going on.
Well,
here.
I was
We
going
have
to
a
say that,
president of the news division
we're
who's been
respecting your time and
put out a
then we
statement
were about
saying
to
that we're
close. Is
doing
there
our
anyone in the room who would like to
internal
ask a last
investigation,
question
and
before we finish?
we're going to wait on that. So,
But do you have any final
that's
thoughts
that.
before we end? Not as well.
Good. Excellent. I just want to say, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is there anyone in the room who would like to ask the last question before we finish? But, do you have any final thoughts before we?
Well, I just want to say to you, first of all, it is a great honor to do this today, and you are in wonderful hands with Dean Reyes, and I have such wonderful hopes for the program that you are all part of now. So if I can be the poster child for getting an internship.
And we want to thank you very much for sharing your journey with us, for coming back to your alma mater, even though it's virtually today, and for sharing a very important tip.
Not been for
so thank you so much.
Incredible internship, and that's all because of FIU. So I think I'll end on that note.
And we will end it here. Thank you so much.